All right, everyone. Hello, and welcome to our second session of Breach Talks. My name is Willem, and I will be today's host. And today we will hear from Breach VR. And Breach VR is a game studio, or a VR studio in Trondheim, and they have just released a game called Kartoffl. And today we are gonna get some insights into that game. And please welcome to the stage Martin Sivertsen.
Thank you, Willem. Thank you. So yes, let me just pull up these presentation things here. So, as Willem said, I am indeed working at this company called Breach. Here they are, really excellent group of very talented people working from offices in Trondheim, Norway. So there's about 25 of us. We've been working with VR, XR, AR, MR technologies, that whole space since we started in 2016. This is how we currently present ourselves on our webpage. We do a wide range of different things at Breach. We are making top secret stuff for some of the largest tech companies in the world. We are training firemen right here in virtual reality in Trondheim. And we also make a little game about walking potatoes. Which begs the question, why would we do that? And it is a good question. We came up in 2019. This was somewhat before the pandemic. Playing with this idea, we were just growing the company at that time pretty rapidly. So we now have we'd gone from like 3, 4, 5 people to, I guess we were maybe 15 or something at that time. And a lot of us, most of us are pretty avid gamers. Everyone is interested in gaming, even though Breach is not really and wasn't really made from the start to be a game studio. We started thinking about maybe we should do a small game project to learn to work as a team, to see if we were able to do this thing, make a game. And we had this idea at the time that we were want to do something where people could come together and play together in the same physical location, but in virtual reality, a co-located gaming experience. So some of the inspirations early on for this game called Kartoffl that I will get to in a second was some of these old games that I used to play and love when I was a kid with my Amiga 500, which was the new paradigm-breaking gaming computer at the time, especially this game to the right here called Lemmings, which really blew my mind in terms of both, it was just pure fun and ingenious in terms of game design. To the left there is another game called Pipe Mania. But the idea for the game that we had envisioned then was something like you have this gang of walking cute little creatures that would just come out from one place in the room, and you had to get them safely to the exit, which was of course on the opposite side of the room. And our inclination then was to say, well, this would be a great multiplayer game where you can play against each other as a kind of would end up as a kind of a virtual reality twister game in the end, where your Spud's path would cross the other walking creature or the other creature's path, and you would somehow have some fun there in the middle. Lemmings, by the way, the original game also had this 2-player game mode that very few people actually tried, but it was possible to play 2 people on the same computer with 2 mice if you had access to that. And that was a pretty hilarious experience because there were levels designed specifically for 2-player game modes, where you get to sabotage each other and send like crazy Spuds all way off into the enemy's camp to do mischief and mayhem. So that was some of the inspiration. But we ended up making and releasing this game. Kartoffl just launched on November 3rd, so it's now available on all the major VR platforms, Oculus Quest, on Steam. And this is the launch trailer. All right. So we ended up in a quite different place than where we set out. Many reasons for that, of course. One of the predominant things was that, of course, right after we started deciding to actually do this, COVID and lockdown happened, and at that point, very few people were interested in or any enthusiastic about the idea of co-located gaming. And we thought we were going to make this game in about half a year. So it seemed like the wrong time to do a multiplayer co-located location-based VR game. Of course, we might have thought differently if we knew at the time that we were actually going to be spending 2.5 years making the game. That's another story. So I thought that the most fun thing to do here would be actually, I've just gathered a lot of material that I've collected throughout the development process. And I'm just going to play this in more or less random order. I just threw them all in a folder and uploaded them here. And just comment. So I think it will be fun for some of you to see, like, basically how the sausage is made and how all the different steps that we ended up going through to design and make this game, and all the stuff that actually didn't make it into the final game as well. So here you can see some of the early character designs that Vegard and I primarily iterated on. This is all Vegard's art. So we started with, like, originally the conception here was of a game where you would be playing little robots, and you can like give upgrades to each individual robots, or you can like guide these robots around. But we went through all these iterations, like what were these creatures, what made sense, what was fun, how could we make them cute and appealing and something you'd actually want to take care of and save. So we went through all these kinds of things. We had this idea with lab drugs and different kinds of lab equipment towards aliens. There were some kind of mutated potatoes that had been grown in a genetic lab or something. We had all this lore figured out at some point as well. But there you can see some of the early designs here. And we ended up, of course, with these potato-like little creatures, which everyone seems to kind of gravitate towards. Here's an early gameplay prototype where we had some toy robot characters. And this was also a two-player kind of setup here. Yeah, you can see some of the ideas we had going already there, which was not so much about puzzle solving at the time, more about path building for these creatures. Here I'll show you very early on, as we started pitching this game concept to get funding for it from the Norwegian Film Institute, amongst others, and the NFI, the Film Institute, has funded us throughout this project, so we're very grateful for that. There you can see some of the original concept that we ended up with, and this is not too far off from where the final game landed, actually, in terms of visuals and mechanics. Here's also some of the ideas we had for like gameplay devices really early on. So none of these, well, especially the cannon didn't make it into the final game, sadly, but the jump pad you saw there actually did. This is the point where I have to change folders. Let's see. There we go. Yeah, I'll show you this early pitch video. This was after our first round of development, where we had worked on this long enough to come up with a prototype. So this is our pitch for like the next phase of the project, really, alpha phase. This was about, I guess, must have been like somewhere between 6 months and 12 months into the actual game production. Might be sound there. So you can still see that. I'm just going to turn the sound on. It's very different, as you can see as well, in terms of environments, particularly, and some of the thinking. This white box version here is something we switched to pretty late in the design phase. Which this is more conceptually like how the finished game ended up, where it's more of a puzzle game where the puzzle world happens like in the middle of the playing field. It's kind of a floating island kind of design, whereas initially we had these ideas of a much richer kind of story-based game, where you would be the setup would be like these spuds had kind of mutated in the labs deep down in the bowels of a office complex of a ominous corporation that was for some reason doing genetic experiments or something, and you would like escape from the lab, and then of course the first levels would then be set in this lab setting deep down underground, and then you would kind of work your way up through this building and eventually reach freedom and escape somehow at the top, and you would have all these things, and this was a kind of thinking that led to a lot of like art explorations and environment explorations, and a lot of level building and things that was really cool in one way, but also we realized it was pretty hard to find the good gameplay in all of this and to create good puzzles. Here's, like I said, all of these are in random order, so I'm just going to comment as they pop up. So this, I think Olaf drew this at some point. One of the big design challenges we had in our game was to figure out what would happen when a spud, because all these creatures, they walk no matter what, they just walk straight ahead, right? If you don't save them, they will, if you don't, change their path, they will walk straight into obstacles or walk off cliffs, and they would die. Unless you somehow guide them in their path. So what would happen if they came to a wall? And this was a huge thing. Like we figured this out very late in the process as well. Like, should they turn left at that point? Should they turn right? Should they make a U-turn? Should they choose randomly whether they turn left or right once they hit a block in their passage? Like, should they somehow get confused and just die or something? And we ended up ultimately with a very simple, pragmatic choice of, okay, well, they're just going to walk into the wall and hit their head and die. You will get to see some of this in these animations as well. This is some death animations that Björn Thomas has done for the game. So a lot of these things are about, like, the spuds will die. If they fall too far, they will die. So you have to soften their fall somehow or redirect them. And here you can see, like, if they walk into a wall now, they will just bump into it and you will lose them. It might not be the best solution, but it was the most pragmatic thing we had, and it solved some real gameplay design challenges for us. And the animations here were just super important to help us sell that idea of the spuds just dying if they bumped into a wall, because it was really hard to envision that looking cool or making any kind of sense. But I think with these animations, you kind of accept it. And we have very few people actually complain or question this, although I was very skeptical to this approach initially. I really wanted them to, like, turn or do something more intelligent, but this worked rather well. Hand-drawn sketch of something that looks pretty much like, more or less like some, like what our, at least structurally, like layout-wise, how our menu system ended up looking. Again, hand-drawn concepts for the devices that end up in your hands when you play the game. These are the tools you use to interact with your world. Or actually, this is the right hand, your primary picker tool, as we call it, from two sides there. This is this never made it in the game, but I think this was Andreas's one. At least somebody drew this as a kind of idea for a device that would be cool, and I agree. It's my favorite sketch probably from the whole design process. And unfortunately, another thing that we ended up not putting in the game for reasons of this is going to be like, you're going to see a lot of things here that I'm looking at some of this and I think, like, Jesus, this would have been such a cool game if we had put those things in. But at the end of it, we just realized we had to trim down and make some sacrifices in terms of what we wanted to do. We had a game to finish, and we really had to downscope basically and focus on the things that we knew were working and that we could make a sensible game system out of. This is a great one. Here's another one from the more like high concept level design things. We had this idea of a one level be happening inside a moving train. So we had spud, like, these would be the bunk beds you see on each side there, and spuds would jump off them and play around in this train cabin. Here is Inge's early system for randomizing spud characteristics so that you have, like, individually shaped spuds. By the way, I call them spuds. We named the game Spuds initially. It was called that for a long time during production. It was not called Kartoffl until, like, the final year of production. The reason we went away from the name Spuds was because there was another VR game launched around this time called Spuds Unearthed, which was launched on PlayStation VR amongst other platforms. And we just didn't want any kind of mix-up or confusion around that. So we just had a naming. It took us a while to find a name, Kartoffl, and once we did, well, we just stuck with that, and I'm pretty happy with that, actually. It is a better name, I think. Yeah. Okay, you already seen this world from one of the earlier demos. It's interesting to see what we did with the this kind of portable computer interface on your left hand there, which basically was the way you would. I mean, this was also like design challenge for us. Like, how could we give you this menu of things to do, like to select your devices from, the devices that you would put into the world to help the spuds? We went through a few iterations of this before we ended up with a much more like garden tool based homemade kind of vibe. So this originally was much more a futuristic, like computerish kind of thing. There's another white gray box kind of gameplay prototype. One of the interesting things here is we experimented with this idea of putting like actual buttons, you can see them down there, that you as a player could actually hit to activate certain things, mechanics in the level. Again, it was just not something it's still a cool idea. Like a lot of these things, these ideas might come back in some kind of future iteration of the game, or asset pack or level pack or something like that. But we just opted out of it for the initial version, at least. Another example of some deformation things. This is great. I think this was somewhat what we ended up with the splatter dying thing when you fell down from a too high a distance. Yeah, don't know about this one, but it's scary. All right, so yeah, this is another example of this. What does this interface look like where you select devices from? A long time we decided, yeah, well, let's drop the sci-fi computer thing. Let's go with something much more tangible and lo-fi. And we had this idea of the notebook, which we actually had in our game for a long time. And this was the actual concept drawings here. I think this, yeah, actually ended up being cooler than what we implemented. So it never really felt quite right to us. You would kind of pull these post-it notes of stuff out of the notebook, and then they will materialize into a 3D asset. But it's a cool idea still. I like it, but we ended up going a different route. All right, this is another cool gameplay idea. Like, we're always thinking, like, what can we do to make this more varied and fun? And this is still a very valid idea, I think. Having, playing with verticality in this way, or anti-gravity, or magnetic boots on these characters, or something like that. Also, in here for a while was this idea of a dynamite stick. Sorry for the video ratio here. It's not, the dimensions are off. This was that you could put like a dynamite stick or a bomb into the world to blow things up, but also to throw spuds flying in all kinds of directions. Again, cool thing that never made it into it. And not to mention this, enemies. There are no hostile things in the game. The only thing, like, the spuds would fall off edges and they would die, or they will walk into propellers and basically get sliced. And these are propellers that you would place as part of your devices. But we had this idea of, and we did lots of prototypes with this as well, and we just never landed on this as necessary to make enough puzzles for the game. But what if there were enemy characters in the game that moved around and chased you, or you had to avoid somehow? Yeah. Are you guys seeing this?
Stopped.
Is this video playing for you?
Yeah.
It's not
all good.
really playing for me.
It's
All
playing
right.
for me.
Okay, so if you're seeing like lots of moving spuds getting piled up in some kind of cluster situation there, this was a huge thing as well in the game. Like we went back and forth on this many times. Should we have fully free moving physics like character controller based type spuds that would just walk everywhere and naturally react to the environment? And just bounce off each other and not be strictly limited in the way they were walking? Or should we have a much more rigid grid-based approach? We ended up with the latter, where basically one space, like a spud could only occupy like one space, and it would move like in a kind of tick-based way from grid square to grid square on this very rigid kind of grid-based level layout, which ended up much easier for us to build actual puzzles around, and because we were much more able to predict how the spuds would move that, and what would kind of limit the range of possibilities in the game, in a sense, to make game design easier, which was a tough call to make design-wise, because in many ways, having a fully physics-based, random, like chaotic approach would potentially be more fun in a way, right? But it also led to huge problems, like what happened when spuds overlapped and ran into each other. And in our final game, they just die if two spuds collide, which rarely happens actually. But here, I think we have more examples of this later. Yeah, here's Inge wearing his Git crown. For some reason, this is in there as well. Here's another prototype of stuff that we considered and are still considering for a future kind of thing we might do if we ever do anything more with this game. Putting hats on people, soap bubbles, hovering. Yeah. Turns into a very Super Mario-ish kind of thing here. Why not throw in a game loop, high level thing as well? As you can see, well, this is interesting, of course. We level editor is in here, as you can see. This we did create a level editor for ourselves in VR level editor, where for internal use primarily, where we could design our levels in VR and then play them immediately, and it would all be saved live and on a server, so that anybody who was working on the game could create levels and play each other's levels, which allowed us to create a whole bunch of levels in a pretty short time, and everybody in the company who were interested in building levels could just download, you could just install the app on their requests and jump in and create levels, and we would just play through them and pick the ones we liked and put them in some kind of order. That's basically how we made the game. I think we have a video of the level editor as well. Of course, we did, and many people still think it's a good idea. It might be to actually make a level editor available for players as well, like publicly available. I mean, which could be fun so that people will be able to create their own levels and then share them with others and have a lot of activity going on that way. So that might still be a missed or upcoming opportunity for us. Another early prototype. I hope you think this is cool to see. To me, at least, I think it's slightly nostalgic just to go back and see like some of the early things we did. But it's also, it's all part of the process. Here again with this cannon idea that also is a great thing that never made it into the final game, where you would be shooting spuds over long distances like this to bridge gaps. Some very cool. Oh, what happened? Hey, well, am I out of time?
Yeah, we are at questions time, so you're not done yet.
Okay.
But yeah, first and foremost, thank you a lot for showing everyone these things and talking about this process of making a game. And as most of us know, that is hard to do. So first and foremost, we have a YouTube stream where we can post questions if you have some, and I'll also be taking some questions if there is any from the audience here. So I guess we will first start with the audience. Please put up your hand if you have any questions. And if, oh, Olaf, you have a question. Please go ahead.
If you could introduce one device into Kartoffl, what would it be?
Well, that's a great question. It is an easy question for me to answer. I have pointed out this several times in the talk as well. I am sad we never got the cannon into the game. So if I could choose one device to put in there, I would reintroduce our lovely cannon that was shown up. I can actually go back and find it here as well, I think. Maybe. Let me see. Yeah, here it is. So not this one. This is in the game, actually, the jump pad. But here is the device I would definitely want to see in the game that never made it, because I just love the animations of it. It's fun. It moves things over large distances, and it's pretty easy thing to conceptualize. But there's so many other cool ones, like soap bubbles, or some kind of gravity reversal. I think is also very, very cool. What would you like to see, Olaf?
Cannon.
That's 2 for cannon.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I'll jump that one. Yeah, great answer. I can just go over to the next one. We have one from the stream, and it's from Anders, and he wants to know what the main learnings from the development process is, and which ones will you take over to the next project?
Yes, that is also an excellent question. And you cut me off before I got to the end of my presentation, Willem. So I'm going to take the opportunity to put on the last slide, if you don't mind. This was our primary learning, right? We thought we were going to do this quickly because it was a simple, small game. Of course, it started bloating in scope, and we had to down scope, and we had to make multiple, design calls. Some of them were wrong. We had to go back and redo them, and it just ended up taking over 2 years. And that is a long time for anything, really, especially what we thought was going to be a small game. So starting to make a game, especially at we are like an indie level game, is a kind of a daunting thing to take on. So it shouldn't be done lightly. It can take a while. Yeah, it's hard. And we realized there's so many darlings in here that we just had to kill, including multiplayer, which was a huge one, right? All of these things, if we had 2 more years or whatever, we would add a lot of things. But I mean, it doesn't make we can't just make a game like this for that long. So we will save a lot of these ideas for a future occasion, for another game or a sequel or a follow-up or whatever, or just put them in cold storage. The other thing is we maybe should have spent even more time than we did just early on to plan and design and do small prototypes. We did do a lot of that, but we also started putting significant resources into art and assets and environment building and stuff like that really early on. Maybe we shouldn't have done that as eagerly. I'm saying maybe because we also did this. We did learn a lot from that process, and it also helped us more to know and find the fun in our game by actually developing a look for it and a setting for it and trying these different things in that much depth that allowed us to kind of pick our path in a way. But it was very I was going to say time consuming and way too expensive way to do this in. So I think pre-production could have been more efficient and better in a sense. But this was very much a learning project for us as well. And the other thing we learned is that we actually made it. I think we made a really good game. It works. It turned out really well. We can do this. We are a studio now that we are able to do things like that. We are making lots of different things, but we are also able to make games, and that is a huge win, I think. And congratulations to all of us, I guess. And there's a lot of breachers in the room here as well, and you should all be proud of yourselves because we did this. Although the game has so far not been a huge sales success. So whether it makes sense to do this kind of, I mean, again, and kind of commercially, it might not make sense, right? For lots of other reasons, it does make sense. The few people who have played our game so far, all the feedback we're getting is there's no bad feedback. Basically, it's all really good. We're getting 5-star average reviews, and all the feedback is good. But of course, the numbers are statistically not very high. But it's not clear that we should be making. I mean, we might have made different calls if we had known then what we know now. And if the game was released 2 years earlier, I think we might have had a better chance in the marketplace. But this is all to say that what we learn is like it's important to make the game right and good, but it's also important to make the right game at the right time. Yeah, that was a long answer, but thanks for the question, Andreas.
Well, I did cut you off there, so nice. I think it answers a lot, and it might answer the next question as well, but feel free to kind of just talk a bit more about it. This one is from Zanderson, and he wants to know if you think Kartoffl is a strong enough IP for a sequel, or if you just think this is a good experience in making games and that will continue off with the next project.
Yeah, I mean, I think a strong IP is a IP that is known and that people embrace and that has some kind of recognition, right? In that sense, I'm not sure. I mean, it's early to say, right? We've been out there with Kartoffl for 2-3 weeks now as a game. I forgot to say, like, never got to it, but one of the most important things we did during development was to create a demo and take that out to people like 7-8 months before we actually launched, just to gather feedback. And we learned so much from that, and also so much from watching people play. But what we've seen, like, everybody thinks that these creatures are really adorable and cute, and we get nothing but positive feedback from everyone who plays the game. I mean, it's hard not to love this setting and these characters, right? I'm not sure that means it's a strong IP, but it could be. At least I definitely think there's potential to do more stuff in the Kartoffl universe, but it's not going to necessarily ride on the fame of Kartoffl. But I see no reason why it's not possible to do more, to use this setting and these characters for other kinds of experiences. And we have ideas there, and we are working on some things that might end up in that area with this IP. But it remains to be seen. I think we're open to suggestions or input there as well.
Awesome, great. Is there any questions from the audience? I see Adam Hassan.
Yes, thank you. First of all, thanks a lot for the talk. I'm just wondering if you have ever considered porting this game to mobile AR?
Yes, that is a great question. I think that could be fun as well. It's definitely possible, right? If you strip away the skybox surroundings and just put the game puzzle in the room on a table or something in front of you, it could very well be a mobile game. And that is definitely one of the options. I think even more interesting, it could be, I'm not a huge fan myself of actually playing AR games on a mobile phone, but I'm a strong believer in once things move from your little handheld screen up to your face, basically, as you do in mixed reality, for instance, that is even a more powerful concept where you are much more, I guess, immersed in the gameplay. I have a hard time just running around with this like a phone and having a good time for prolonged periods of time. But I think conceptually, it's a great idea.
Yeah. Cool, thanks.
Great question. We have some more questions from the YouTube chat from Andreas. And he wants to know what the relations we have with game design documents, I guess, relating to this game specifically.
Yes, that is a good question. Thank you, Andreas. Yeah, there was supposed to be a unifying game design document. This goes back to our pre-production, the point I have up here. Maybe we should have spent more time fleshing that out properly before we started production, because we kind of never really followed the book there in a sense. Our relationship with the game design documents was meager. Let me put it that way. We were very much trying things out, testing things, figuring out what worked. We had lots of meetings, lots of sketches, lots of hand-drawns and conceptual sketches, lots of discussions about game design. And I think the reason we never felt that it was necessary or natural to put all this down in a game design doc is that we were simply not able to kind of paper design or design our way through the full experience early on. We took all this time to find the fun, and we were designing game mechanics up until the last minute, in a sense, before we kind of said to ourselves, the game is done now, or we have found the final formula. So that is a thing. I think some games are more suitable to be fully designed from the start, and of course it will be perfectly possible to come up to write a game design document after the fact, once the game is kind of figured out. But at that point, what's the point? So that is we are guilty there of not really having a good relationship with game design documents here. We hope maybe we can do that in a future project, our next game project.
Yeah, I think it's a fair answer. Is there any questions from the audience? If not, we have a couple of them. Let's see. All right, another question, and you might like this one. If you had one more year of development, I guess, except for the canon, what would you add to the game? Or what would you change about the game?
Yeah, that is. I think there are a couple of things that are high up on the wish list. I think there are two core things that I would like to see. The one thing is, I still think multiplayer is an excellent idea for this. It would add so much replayability. You could either co-op or player versus player. In a sense, you could co-op to solve puzzles, but you could also have a versus mode where you would actually compete against another player to save the most spuds or something. I think that would be super fun. So I would probably go for that. I know there's a lot of a lot of push for this idea of including the level editor as well, which is, I also really like that idea of just making that available. That is, I think, a pretty large task, because I think we would need to double the amount, at least, of available devices and assets and things, which we have a lot of ideas for that, so that should be doable. But there's also this whole idea of then you would need to add a kind of a social community, or at least some way of sharing levels and having a kind of discoverability there, and finding some interesting things to do with the levels you create in terms of getting them exposed to other players and getting feedback on them, or watching people play them or play them together. So I think that would probably take a longer, if we're to do it right. We can just do a simple thing. You create a level for yourself and you're able to play it, but I don't think that would be as much fun. So to do the level editor thing properly, I think would take more than a year. But it would be really cool as well, I think.
Yeah, great one. I guess another thing, now we talked about what you want to add. What is your favorite part of the game that is launched, of Kartoffl?
Oh, my favorite part.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is a great question. I mean, I have this game so much in my head, and I feel like I've been breathing this game for years now. So I'm, in one way, really glad to get it out there. It's kind of a giving. I'm not going to claim I know what that's like, but it feels like I've been giving birth to something. I kind of want to yeah, you're free now. Go out in the world. But I think there's some moments I really like. I still really enjoy watching Spud being catapulted by one of these jump pad devices and hitting a wall and just sliding down is probably one of my favorite kind of in-game moments. But yeah, I think also we made a couple of cool challenging levels. People find that the game is really easy early on. The first 20 levels or something are a breeze to get through, but some of the later ones are really, really challenging because it's not only about planning the game where you want to place the devices to solve the puzzle. It also becomes like a physical timing, really challenging sensory motor kind of thing where you have to move around and do all these things simultaneously and be very careful about the exact timing you do things in, which a lot of people have commented they're surprised of the game taking this pretty more or less a hardcore turn, which I also like about the game. Mm-hmm.
Right, awesome. That was the last question. So with that, I'm about to round off. But if you have any last things you want to say, feel free.
I just want to say thanks for all the great questions.
No
yeah,
worries.
they were excellent. Thanks,
They're
and thanks for having me and giving me the opportunity to talk so much about this and showing off all the cool work that a lot of you guys in the room here have been part of. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, awesome, and thanks from everyone here. I can see they kind of want to clap, but it's hard to do here.
It's hard to do. I'll do it.
Yes.
All right. This has been fun. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you everyone for coming, both here in VR and those of you who have tuned into the YouTube stream. This was a talk about Kartoffl. And there's another one of these Breach game talks coming up on Thursday in 2 days at 7 or in the evening. There's an event on Facebook and Discord. So with that said, thank you for coming and have a great day.